It was supposed to be just another weekend adventure. 3 experienced cavers, weaving their way through the forgotten mines of northern Arizona, chasing dust and echoes where men once chased gold. They had explored dozens of shafts before, but this one hidden beneath tangled brush and crumbling rock felt different. Something about the air was heavier, older, wrong. When the first flashlight beam caught sight of the strange shapes in the corner, time seemed to slow. 2 sleeping bags, coated in grime and decay, stitched shut with thick twine like some homemade burial. What they found inside would end an 11-year-old mystery and spark 1,000 new ones. Who killed the young couple now confirmed to be buried deep in that mine? And why were their bodies hidden for days before being lowered into that darkness? If you're ready to uncover the chilling truths behind this case, like this video and subscribe to Unscripted Tales, where the strangest stories still hiding in the shadows come to light. The descent into the old mine shaft was treacherous, a vertical drop nearly 100 feet deep, surrounded by fractured rock and the stifling smell of mold and mineral rot. The cavers were meticulous and cautious, using climbing ropes and anchors to ensure a safe approach. When the first man's boots hit the bottom, he expected nothing more than crumbling debris and the remnants of rusted tools. But then his headlamp flicked across the far wall and what he saw rooted him in place. 2 long, oblong forms, blue and green sleeping bags, coated with years of dust. They weren't just zipped shut. Thick hand-sewn twine sealed them from top to bottom, the crude stitches slashing across the fabric like scars. The caver backed away slowly, his instincts screaming. He didn't touch anything. He climbed out and told the others. Something was very wrong. Within hours, the site was crawling with sheriff's deputies and forensic teams. The mine was so remote that emergency crews had to hike part of the way in on foot. They secured the shaft, sent cameras down, and confirmed the worst. Human remains were inside the bags. The bodies were airlifted out under strict protocol and sent to a forensic lab. A week later, the results arrived. DNA and dental records matched the remains to a couple who had vanished in 2010. Miles Grayson and Ava Walker, a graphic designer and a nurse. Just a couple on a weekend road trip through the desert. For 11 years, there had been no sign of them. No crime scene, no answers, just silence. Until now. Miles Grayson and Ava Walker were not the kind of people who went looking for danger. They lived quiet, happy lives in Phoenix, Arizona. Miles was 27, a laid-back graphic designer who loved photography. Ava, 25, worked long shifts as a nurse but found peace in nature. They were just like any young couple, working hard, dreaming together, and escaping the city every now and then for a breath of wilderness air. That is exactly what they planned in early June of 2010, a simple weekend getaway. Just the 2 of them, the open road, and the wild beauty of northern Arizona. They packed their silver Honda Civic with care. A tent, sleeping bags, food, water, a small camping stove, and of course, a camera. Their route was simple. Drive north to the Grand Canyon, take photos, sleep under the stars, and return home by Sunday night. No one expected anything to go wrong. Before they left on Friday morning, Ava called her mother. Cheerful as always, Miles posted one last photo to his social media-wide smile and the caption, "Off to chase the stars." On Saturday, June 12th, they were seen for the last time. A gas station attendant near the southern entrance to the Grand Canyon remembered them clearly. Miles was pumping gas while Ava sat in the passenger seat studying a map. They looked calm, normal. There were no signs of stress or fear. They bought gas, a bottle of water, and a bag of chips. Then they drove south, back onto Highway 180. After that, nothing. Ava always called her mother after a trip. It was their little tradition. When that call never came on Sunday evening, her mother felt uneasy. But maybe there was no signal. That had happened before. Still, Monday morning brought no news. Neither of them showed up for work. Their phones went straight to voicemail. That was when the worry turned into panic. By Monday evening, both families had filed official missing person reports. The police moved quickly. Phone records showed that the last ping from either device came near the same area where they were last seen. Their credit and debit cards had not been used since the gas station. That was not normal. If they had just gotten lost or changed their plans, they would still need food or fuel. But it was like they had vanished into the air. A massive search began. Helicopters scanned the dense forests. Search parties combed trails and roadside ditches, but it was like trying to find a shadow in the dark. There was no crash site, no wreckage, no tent pitched by a stream, no sign of struggle, no sign of anything. They had simply disappeared. But then, a week later, something strange surfaced deep in the woods, something that would only raise more questions than answers. What did the police find tucked away on that old forest road? And why did it only make the mystery deeper? The forest road was almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. It was narrow, overgrown, and seemed more like a game trail than something made for cars. On June 19th, a full week after Miles and Ava had disappeared, a forest ranger spotted something just off Highway 180. Tucked behind the trees and barely visible from the main road was a silver Honda Civic. It was dusty, quiet, and still. The ranger radioed it in, and within hours, police and investigators arrived at the scene. Everyone hoped this was the break they needed, but what they found only made the story stranger. The car was locked. No broken glass, no forced entry. It looked like someone had simply parked it and walked away. Inside the car, everything was exactly where it should not have been if two people had decided to vanish. On the front passenger seat was the same bag of chips they had bought at the gas station 10:30. Next to it, a folded map. The keys were on the driver's seat. In the glove box were both their wallets, IDs, and several $100s in cash. In the back seat were their backpacks, clothes, tent, and sleeping bags. Everything was in order. In order. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no broken items, no trace that anyone else had even been inside the car. Forensics confirmed it. The only fingerprints found belonged to Miles and Ava. There were no tire tracks from another vehicle nearby, no extra footprints. Only one pair each of Miles and Ava's boots led away from the car, and even those faded out quickly on the rocky terrain. Dogs brought in to track the scent lost it after just a few hundred yards. The ground was too dry, too stony. Whatever trail they had left disappeared into the wilderness. None of it made sense. If they had wandered off, why leave behind food, water, money, and their phones? If they had run from something, why lock the car and take nothing with them? If it was a robbery or an attack, why was everything valuable left untouched? And if it was something else entirely, then what? The theories started swirling fast. Some said they had gotten lost and could still be out there, injured or hiding. Others suggested they had planned to disappear, but that did not hold up. Why leave behind money and IDs? Why go through the trouble of packing for a trip, only to abandon it all in the middle of nowhere? The police dug into every angle. Maybe someone had tricked them, posed as a helpful stranger, or even as a park ranger. Maybe they had picked someone up, offered a ride, or stopped to help. But every road led to a dead end. No witnesses had seen anyone unusual around the area that day. No other cars had been reported. No other hikers had gone missing. There was nothing. As the days turned into weeks, the forest search grew desperate. Hundreds of square miles were searched. Volunteers, dogs, drones, even cave experts combed the area. They looked under ledges, inside old cabins, and down into shallow ravines. But there were no more clues. No broken branches, no dropped belongings, no drag marks. It was as if the couple had stepped into the trees and simply vanished. Eventually, the search was scaled back. Not because people had given up, but because there was simply nowhere else to look. The forest was quiet again, still, as if it had never known Miles and Ava at all. Their photos remained posted on bulletin boards, in sheriff offices and trailheads. Their families kept calling, hoping, praying, but no one had any answers. And over time, the case grew cold. Another mystery swallowed by the wild. But even as the trail disappeared, one haunting thought remained. If Miles and Ava did not leave the forest, where were they? What if someone else was out there watching, waiting, hiding something far darker? And what if the real reason they disappeared was never about getting lost at all? Time passed, but the silence around Miles and Ava's disappearance only grew louder. Months turned into years, and the case, once full of urgency, began to feel like a shadow. There were no new witnesses, no calls, no strange tips. It was like the forest had swallowed every trace and buried it under layers of wind and time. Still, people could not let it go. And so, when answers failed, theories began to rise. At first, the most logical explanations were considered. Maybe they had gotten lost, but that did not match the facts. If they had wandered off, they would have taken supplies, water, at the very least. Their car was their only lifeline, and yet it was locked and left behind with everything they needed to survive. Then came the idea that they had chosen to disappear. A clean break, but again, it did not make sense. Why leave behind money, ID cards, even a nearly full tank of gas? There was no sign of struggle, but also no sign of planning. It was not a runaway. It was not an accident. It was something else. As time went on, more unusual theories began to spread. Online forums picked up the story, and soon people from all over the country were trying to solve it. Some said it was the work of a highway serial killer, someone who moved along rural roads and targeted young couples. But the database of missing persons showed no clear pattern. No other case lined up perfectly with what happened to Miles and Ava. Others believed they had stumbled upon something they were not meant to see. Maybe they had unknowingly found an illegal drug lab hidden deep in the woods. Or maybe they had wandered onto private land where someone dangerous was living off the grid, a recluse, a veteran, someone broken or violent who did not want to be disturbed. That theory gained popularity because it explained the calm scene at the car. If someone had held them at gunpoint, told them to step out without a fight, that would explain why nothing looked out of place. No broken glass, no signs of panic, just the two of them walking into the trees and never coming back. But even that theory had problems. Who was this person? And why was there no sign of where they had been taken? Police followed every lead they could. They looked into locals with criminal histories, checked property records, and interviewed everyone who lived near the area at the time. Hunters, hikers, former miners. No one had seen anything. No one had heard anything. No one had even known about the old forest road where the car had been found. The only thing everyone agreed on was this: whoever was responsible had to know the area very well. They had to be someone with access to remote places and the knowledge of how to stay hidden. That made the mystery even more frightening. It meant the person who did this had not stumbled onto Miles and Ava by chance. They were waiting, or watching. Their families never stopped hoping. They gave interviews, hired private investigators, and even created a website to keep the story alive. But with each passing year, it became harder to believe they would get answers. The world moved on. But in certain corners of Arizona, the story of the missing couple became something else. A local legend, a dark warning whispered around campfires and backroads. Then one day, more than a decade later, that legend was ripped open, because the cavers did not just find bodies in that mine. They found something that changed everything. The mine shaft was nearly forgotten, covered in brush, hidden by time, and sealed with fallen rock. It had likely not been seen or touched for decades. That is why the group of 3 weekend cavers knew they had found something special. The shaft was vertical, deep, and completely silent. A dark wound in the earth, waiting. But they had no idea that inside this place, so still and undisturbed, lay the missing truth of a mystery that had haunted families, detectives, and strangers for more than a decade. Their descent was careful and slow. The deepest of the 3 went first. His headlamp swept across the jagged rock as he moved downward, the beam catching mineral veins and dust floating like ghosts in the air. At the bottom, he saw debris, old wooden beams from collapsed supports, and then 2 shapes in the far corner, long still, covered in dirt and time. Sleeping bags, one green, one blue, faded but whole, odd in itself. But what stopped him cold was the stitching. From top to bottom, each bag had been sewn shut by hand, not with thread, but with thick twine, uneven, rough, and deliberate, a kind of final seal, not meant to be undone. That was when he knew. These were not just old camping gear lost by some forgotten explorer. Something terrible had happened here. They did not touch anything. The caver signaled his team and climbed out. Once back on the surface, they hiked to where cell signal returned and called the police. Soon, the forest around the shaft filled with quiet tension. Deputies arrived first, then forensic specialists. The area was so remote, they had to hike the last half-mile on foot, carrying gear over rugged ground. It took hours to secure the site and lower a crime scene investigator into the shaft. It confirmed what everyone feared. Human remains were inside the sleeping bags. Carefully, using ropes and pulleys, each bag was lifted out. They were placed into airtight containers and transported directly to the coroner's lab. The mystery that had remained untouched for 11 years was finally breathing again. When the results came back, they confirmed what most already knew in their hearts. The remains were those of Miles Grayson and Ava Walker. Their families, after years of silence, finally had something to hold on to. But instead of peace, what they received was more horror, because now there were answers, and none of them made sense. The autopsy revealed that Miles had died from a powerful blow to the back of his head. Something heavy and hard had crushed his skull. It was quick, brutal, and intentional. Ava had been strangled. Her injuries were more personal, more intimate, as if the killer had taken their time. These were not accidents, not lost hikers, not people who got stuck and died waiting for help. This was murder. But what truly shook everyone was the forensic timeline. The pathologists and entomologists studied the bones, the decay, and the insects left behind. Their conclusion: the bodies had not been placed in the mine right after the deaths. They had been kept somewhere else for at least 24 to 48 hours. Then, and only then, they were sewn into the sleeping bags and dropped into the darkness. This detail changed everything. It meant the killer had not acted in a panic. He had a plan. He had a place. He had time to prepare, to wait, to make sure he would not be caught. Whoever did this did not just kill. He stored 2 bodies for a day or more, then transported them to a place only a few in the region even knew existed. A place so hidden that it would take 11 years and pure chance to be discovered. Police revisited the original case files. They now had 2 confirmed murders, a hidden disposal site, and a critical time gap. This was no longer a disappearance. This was a double homicide, carried out with care, patience, and purpose. And most terrifying of all, it suggested that whoever had done this may still be out there living a quiet life, maybe even passing by those same roads, knowing his secret lay buried underground, untouched for over a decade. But there was one more piece that made the case darker than anyone could have imagined. The police believed the killer was not a stranger to these woods. He knew them, he used them, and that meant he may not have been far at all. The question now was chilling. Who had the time, the place, and the coldness to carry out such a quiet, perfect vanishing act? The discovery of the mine and the bodies inside should have brought closure. It should have answered the question that had haunted everyone for 11 years. But instead, it opened a door to something far more unsettling. The deeper investigators looked, the more they realized that the truth behind Miles and Ava's deaths was darker and more complicated than anyone had imagined. The time gap between their deaths and the moment their bodies were hidden in the mine was the first major problem. Storing 2 bodies for 24 to 48 hours in the middle of the Arizona wilderness was not something just anyone could do. You needed shelter, space, privacy, and most of all, time. This was not a crime of panic or rage. This was cold, calculated. Someone had prepared for this, or, at the very least, knew exactly what to do once it was over. Investigators began re-examining the area. They measured the distance between where the car had been found and where the mine was located. Nearly 50 miles separated them, and much of that distance ran through remote, unpaved forest roads. To travel that route, you would need a strong vehicle, most likely a truck or SUV, and a deep familiarity with the terrain. Whoever took the bodies to that mine had either grown up there or spent a lot of time in those woods. This raised an even more disturbing theory. What if the killer was not a stranger passing through? What if he was a local, someone who lived nearby, blended in, waved at neighbors, and never raised suspicion? Someone who knew exactly which roads were unmarked, which paths were hidden, and which abandoned places had been long forgotten. The mine shaft where Miles and Ava were found was not listed on any modern maps. It dated back to the 1800s and had been sealed off decades ago. The cavers who found it only stumbled across it by accident. For someone to know it was there and to trust it enough to hide bodies in it meant they had been there before. Maybe, many times, that kind of knowledge does not come from luck. It comes from experience. Police started a wide search, looking into property owners within a 50-mile radius of the mine. They searched records for anyone with a violent past, a history of mental instability, or anyone who had gone off the grid. During that time, they looked at hunters, former miners, forest workers, and survivalists. They dug through files from 2010, hoping to find a missing piece. But there was nothing. No one stood out. No one had a clear motive. No one even had a proper alibi, but after 11 years, proving anything had become nearly impossible. People had moved, changed names, passed away. Others had simply forgotten where they had been on a random weekend more than a decade ago. Forensics offered little help. The sleeping bags were generic, mass-produced, sold in thousands of stores. The twine used to sew them shut was the same, common, untraceable. There were no fingerprints, no hairs, no usable DNA. The mine had protected everything, but time had erased nearly all clues. Still, there was something about the way the bodies had been prepared that haunted the investigators. It was not just disposal, it felt like ritual. Sewing the bags shut by hand, stitch after stitch, was slow, deliberate work. It was not efficient. It was not necessary. It was personal, as if the killer wanted to erase who they were, turn them into objects, sealed and silent, never to be found again. It also told them something else. Whoever did this was not afraid of being caught. He took his time. He did not run. He planned. He hid the bodies in a way that made it clear he never expected anyone to find them. And if those cavers had not pulled away those rocks, the world might still believe that Miles and Ava had simply vanished. The case was open again, but the trail was colder than ever. Even with the bodies recovered, the police had no names, no motive, no timeline, just two victims and a killer who had disappeared into the trees like smoke. But as they searched through the silence, a single, terrifying question kept coming back. What if he has done this before? The final pieces of the puzzle were spread thin. A double murder, 2 young lives stolen, and a trail buried under 11 years of silence. Miles, Grayson, and Ava Walker were not just victims of a violent act. They were victims of someone who knew exactly what they were doing, someone cold, patient, and hidden in plain sight. The psychological profile painted a clear picture. This was a man, likely in his 30s or 40s, back in 2010, strong enough to carry and move to bodies, smart enough to avoid cameras, fingerprints, and witnesses. He was methodical. The way he killed was not the same for both. Miles was struck, fast and hard, most likely first removing the physical threat. Ava was strangled, a slower, more personal act. The difference in methods revealed not just control, but intent. This was someone who had done this before, or at least had thought about it for a very long time. The storage of the bodies told detectives something even more chilling. He had a location ready somewhere safe, hidden, private, not a tent or a tarp in the woods, but a real place, a shed, a cabin, maybe even a basement. He had access to a vehicle that could move through rough forest terrain. He had the knowledge to avoid detection, and most of all, he had confidence. Confidence that no one would ever find them. Detectives believed he was a local, maybe not someone born there, but someone who knew the land, who hunted in those woods, camped, explored mines. Maybe he was a former miner himself. Maybe he was just someone who lived quietly, unnoticed, with a secret life, a predator in plain clothes, someone who could be your neighbor, the man who fixed your roof, or the quiet face behind a grocery counter. But despite every effort, no name ever surfaced, no confession came. The DNA found on the sleeping bags was too degraded to trace. The killer left behind no trail, no calling card, no reason. He did what he set out to do, and he vanished, just like Miles and Ava. And so the case, even after all this time, finds itself at a full circle. We now know how they died. We know where they were left, but the who and the why remain out of reach. What was it about that quiet weekend road trip that brought them face to face with a monster? Was it just random, a wrong turn into the hands of the wrong man? Their families, after so many years of pain and waiting, finally laid them to rest. They got to say goodbye, but they never got justice, and that is the cruelest part. Somewhere, out there, the person who ended 2 bright lives still walks free, still keeps the secret, still lives in a world that never knew what he did. The sleeping bags are now in evidence storage. The mine shaft has been sealed for good, and the forest, quiet as ever, keeps watching, just like it did on that day in June 2010. If you are still watching this story, it means it reached your heart, and maybe, just maybe, you want to see justice done too. So please, give this video a like, and subscribe to Unscripted Tales. I have a small dare from my mother to get this story to 1,000 likes. It is totally free for you, but it means everything to me. And one more thing, tell me in the comments, From which city are you watching this story?